In today's fast-paced information age, it can be hard to look at the bigger picture and to approach situations with logic when one is confronted with bias and bigots. Particularly with the 2024 presidential election being less than a year away, Americans are becoming even more divided on partisan lines. It is crucial in times like these that the masses stay media literate and can identify the trends of the past to not make the same mistakes in the present and future. Understanding the history of past conflicts, as well as having media literacy in a world of media illiteracy, helps us to navigate the complex landscape of political information, misinformation, and bias. In the next few minutes, I hope to give you, yes you, the audience, an overall understanding of what is happening now, and what you can do to prevent personal views from developing because of a misshaping of perspective and evidence. So strap on your metaphorical seatbelts, and let's get this bus on the road! Oxford Languages defines media literacy as the ability to critically analyze stories presented in the mass media and to determine their accuracy or credibility. To have media literacy, one must be aware of a whole slew of ideas, but today I've graciously narrowed it down to 4 key concepts: single perspective, confirmation bias, the blame instinct, and flick. Each of these plays a significant role in how we perceive political information, and a lack of knowledge of them has helped misinformation run rampant in past and present news cycles. Let's start with single perspective. Hans Rosling, famous Swedish physician and public speaker, defined the term in his book Factfulness as a general tendency of people to understand the world from one point of view, which can then lead to a skewed and incomplete understanding of complex issues. Rosling argues that relying on a single perspective can result in a narrow mindset that prevents people from seeing the bigger picture and exploring alternate pathways for thinking, meaning that to combat this, people should look at multiple perspectives to gain a more accurate understanding of global trends and realities. He also specifically mentions that the more we feel like an expert in something, the more we tend to develop a single perspective, because we want to apply that expertise to every scenario. While Rosling mainly applies the single perspective to his experiences of seeing medical practitioners not thinking about different diagnoses because of preconceived notions, we can also apply this concept to politics. Many politicians, including the 2 currently running for president, tend to oversimplify big issues by applying their worldview, single perspective, as a single solution. Take Donald Trump for example. His successful 2016 campaign for the presidency largely hinged on the fact that he was a successful businessman. Many believe that he was different from past politicians because he came from a separate sphere and could offer new ideas to the table, making America great again by turning it into a successful business. His plan of only applying his business expertise to issues in America quickly showed its many weaknesses when COVID-19 hit. He constantly denied the severity of the virus, and as a result, his economic policy, the thing that he was supposedly an expert on, failed to meet the mark. An ABC article from 2021 titled "A Look at Trump's Economic Legacy" states that the unemployment rate skyrocketed to 14.7% in April. It receded to 6.7% as of last month, but remains about the level of 4.8% when Trump took office in 2016. Because of Trump's single perspective, he was unable to deal with issues outside of his ballpark, like a global disease. Even with this obvious economic failure during his presidency, a recent study conducted by the Brookings Institute found that 65% of voters in 2024 would view the economic policy under Trump as generally good. Now, it's important to keep in mind that we shouldn't let simple words from simple-minded ideals sway us in the upcoming months. Don't let other people's single perspective make you have their single perspective as well. Be willing to look at issues from different lenses of critical thinking, like a purely economic view combined with a more social view, all together. Moving on from that, we have another term mentioned by Hans Rosling, confirmation bias. In the same book, Factfulness, he mentions the idea of confirmation bias and describes it as a tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs while disregarding contradictory evidence. During election season, confirmation bias can lead us to only consume media that aligns with our political views. A study conducted by the Pew Research Center found that during the 2020 election, 25% of Democrats and Republicans only consumed media from sources that lean toward an audience similar to themselves. This selective exposure to media can create echo chambers, where we're only exposed to like-minded opinions. This then intensifies partisan polarization and narrows people's views on issues, when in reality, every issue in the world today is complex and has sides that need to be addressed in equal value. The 2020 election cycle saw that polarization, which even led to an insurrection on January 6th, largely caused by a small group of Republican extremists who believed that Trump had won the election and was robbed of that result. They came to that conclusion likely due to one-sided media consumption, where they couldn't see the plethora of evidence pointing to a conclusion against their view. To prevent a disaster of that scale from happening again this year, we must understand that while it is hard to look at the media produced by those we don't 100% agree with, hard things must be done in critical scenarios such as the one we are in right now. One way that politicians enhance partisan feelings among their followers is by blaming their opposition. The blame instinct, a term yet again coined by Hans Rosling, is, as defined in Factfulness, the tendency to find a clear and simple reason for why something bad has happened, often by blaming an individual or a group. In his book, he creates an example where by trying to find a single blame for an issue, for him corruption in the world of medicine, we might be inclined to punch grandma, because trying to find one blame is impossible. Deeply rooted systemic issues create societal problems, not just people or groups. In political conflicts, this can manifest as scapegoating, particularly on social media campaigns, like on the popular app Instagram. According to another study done by the Pew Research Center, it found that 16% of Americans got their news from Instagram. That means more than 1 in 10 Americans have a chance of seeing manipulative campaign ads while casually looking at cat memes. An article from the New York Times found that with Trump's campaign this year, it has garnered new viewership and support from young people. They state, Donald J. Trump leads President Biden in 5 crucial battleground states, a new set of polls shows, as a yearning for change and discontent over the economy and the war in Gaza among young, Black, and Hispanic voters threaten to unravel the president's Democratic coalition. Their support partially comes from Trump's great use of the blame instinct. One look on his socials can find a plethora of different claims that Biden is single-handedly funding Hamas or that he is the only one causing inflation to increase. While it is far from the case, the simple root of the problem that Trump has presented to his audience has, as that article showed, been effective. That isn't to say Biden is innocent either. One look at his past and current campaign shows a flawed Trump is the main problem view as well. After all, his campaign this year and in 2020 were centered around if you don't want Trump, then you should want me, and that Trump single-handedly caused COVID to escalate in 2020, and that he hates all minorities in 2020 and now. The blame instinct is prevalent in both political parties because of how easy it is to implement. Saying we have one villain that is to blame makes finding a solution sound simple too, but we can't let simplicity fool us. Within America's checks and balances system, it's actually pretty impossible for a president or any politician to be the sole blame for an issue, because they don't have enough power to have that much of an effect on policy. By understanding the concept of the blame instinct, it helps us, the unintentional consumers of propaganda-like campaigns, to know to look at the bigger picture. Yes, it takes time to research issues presented to us under false guises of simplicity, but it is much better than being manipulated with false news. Just ask some critical questions. What are the underlying factors? Who benefits from this narrative? What's being left out? Finally, let's talk about FLIC. This acronym, as described in Seema Yasmin's book What the Fact, stands for fake experts, who present themselves as authorities without relevant qualifications, logical fallacies that use flawed reasoning to sound smart, impossible expectations that seek to discredit opponents by setting unrealistic standards, cherry picking, highlighting specific data that only supports one's point, and conspiracy theories, which offer unfounded explanations for events. FLIC can be found in many news sites that are more left or right-leaning currently. But let's step back from the elections for a minute and look at an example of where FLIC went horribly wrong. Back when the Sandy Hook shooting occurred, a right-wing extremist by the name of Alex Jones started spreading misinformation en masse through his many platforms. On a New York Times look-back article on the controversy, they compiled many quotes from the man, including a time when he said, "My gut is, with the timing and everything that happened, this is staged. And you know I've been saying the last few months, get ready for big mass shootings, and then magically it happens." This event was obviously filled with misinformation, as you can see, and we can find many aspects of FLIC present. For example, the whole event is based off of a conspiracy theory that everyone harmed by the school shooting were paid actors hired by anti-gun organizations that wanted to advance an agenda. An impossible conclusion, yet it was concluded and believed nonetheless. We also see a false expert, Alex Jones himself, as it makes no sense for a man not involved in the shooting at all to be the one to comment on it and its supposed legitimacy. FLIC, as shown here, is used to inflate strange conclusions into plausible ideas, so we must be careful to make sure we don't be fooled by such uses of Flick now. People and events aren't inherently filled with evil intent, and any conclusion that sounds extreme is likely extreme. With the election, we are bound to get ideas as drastic as the one mentioned here, that are trying to manipulate people to a side. As I've been repeating throughout this video, everything is complex. Negative and positive things are still complex, so do not let Flick users trick you when consuming election content. As we approach the 2024 US presidential elections, media literacy will be our ally in navigating the political landscape. By recognizing single perspectives, confirmation bias, the blame instinct, and the tactics encapsulated in Flick, we can make informed decisions and contribute to a healthier democratic process. Remember, being media literate isn't just about consuming information, it's about engaging critically and responsibly. Let's commit to being informed voters and fostering a more informed society. Thank you for watching.